Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Spectral on Netflix Film. So, I was actually really intrigued by this movie when I saw it randomly one day. So I was like, well, you know what? Like, if I have a day, I'm going to go on and rewatch this film. And, like, I really just still enjoyed it. Even though I kind of technically had seen bits and pieces of it twice. So what happens in this film? We have an engineer named Klein who comes to find out had put this kind of helmet cam together for the military so they can kind of see certain things. Come to find out, this equipment is to go on and seemingly malfunction. So Klein goes to this Russian base to confirm that it's not really his equipment that's malfunctioning. There's something that's just really there. So we come to find out that there is to be this new threat that arrives, and they're like, okay, how can we defeat this thing? And they can't quite figure that out. They have to go on and really be in this Russian area to start to see that this thing does have weaknesses. And so the further and further we go into this story, like the more of these like massive battles happen, and how Klein has to go on and figure out the origin of where this whole experiment really happened so he can shut it off. And so with that said, like, I thought this movie was great. There might be some military jargon or some sciency jargon, but like I liked this movie either way. Like I would, of course, like it enough to see it more than once. So with that said, yeah, like this movie was so interesting, and I wish we can go on and see this kind of film elsewhere. Um, and kind of see it like done in other ways, or to have possibly gone on to have people uh, like ghosts against a town and have them kind of figure it out or put pieces together fairly quickly. And so yeah. So with that said, that was a really quick way of describing this film, but I think also I want to go on and get into spoilers quickly about this movie also. So if I haven't said it already, this movie is on Netflix. Luckily, there's one movie that's convenient for people to see if you haven't already, because this may be a fairly old film on Netflix, anyways. But yeah, so with that said, I think it's about that time to just double five this bad boy up. It's about that time yet again to, of course, go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time you get to spoil this movie. So, in the beginning of the film, we, of course, have Sergeant Chris Davis, who is on his own and he's waiting for a second wave of soldiers to come and kind of be his cavalry. And they state that his group is going to be about 8 to 10 minutes out. And Davis is like, I don't think I can wait that long. So Davis states that these guys can go on and kind of follow him to where he's going. So Davis all of a sudden starts walking and is to encounter one of these unusual entities. And by the time that he is to figure out what's going on, maybe thinking that his equipment is either malfunctioning or like something's going on here, unusual, Davis gets attacked and dies. So we have both Klein and we have both Ephraim that are at DARPA. And they're going on to put this experiment that we, of course, have Dr. Mandala, who is kind of explaining to these kind of funding guys that Klein is to somehow have concocted this laser that is to wipe out this water source, which, of course, is this block of ice. So the laser ends up working out, and so the guys are now just like, well, okay, like, can it like destroy or wipe out a human like subject? And Klein's like, well, you guys are any of you guys gonna volunteer? And it's like, funny. So Klein doesn't want to go on and do anything further than wiping out a water source, but we have Dr. Mandala that convinces him otherwise. But also, Mandala is to tell Klein that it seems that his helmet cams might have some kind of malfunction, so Klein is going to have to fly all the way to Russia to figure out what it is. So Klein then goes on to Russia to talk to General Orland. And so General Orland is to say to Klein that at some point that whoever they took this base from originally had lost it somehow, and so they were just kind of left here. So General General Orland takes Klein to this one computer screen where it ends up showing this clip of this one entity, and Klein is to really look at it close, and Klein is like, well, I don't think that this could be some malfunction on my end of my equipment. And so General Orland is like, okay, since like you gave your thoughts about this, so General Orland has Klein go on to come with him to talk to the CIA agent Fran to sign this waiver for him to never tell a soul what he had heard and what he had done here. Klein signs it, and so we have General Orland that goes on to explain that they assume that whatever this is some kind of uh, camouflage armor that people are going on and attacking people with. So we have Klein that's like, okay, like maybe that might be it, but then again, maybe not. So they're like, well, hey, like that's the only conclusion that we have until we kind of rule it out and go into unexplained conclusions. So Klein is just like, okay. So Klein is to go on and explain that he has a bigger camera for the General Orland, and is to state that uh, like they would have to kind of prop this certain kind of camera on a truck. So we have General Orland that is to state is like, well, okay, like I'll get one of my tech guys and you can go on and explain this all to him. And Klein's like, no, 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 no. Like I would rather actually go onto the mission and use this camera myself instead of having to teach somebody else how to use it. And so General Orland's like, well, that would mean you would have to go out in the field. And Klein's like, yeah, I understand that. So we have General Orland lets Klein do this. And so Klein goes on and is to mount this camera onto this truck. And we all of a sudden have a number of military guys that are kind of offended that Klein is going to put this camera there instead of some gun. And so we have Klein getting crap, and so we then have Captain Marco that steps in. It's like, well, hey guys, like this guy works in DARPA, and I'm sure he's created a number of things that you guys use every day, and you don't even realize it. So, like, hey, give this guy a lot more respect. So we have Captain Sessions that, of course, walks in, and we come to find out that Captain Sessions was very close to Davis. So Captain Sessions tells Klein, it's like, well, hey, like you better go on and you better make your like equipment just top notch. Like I want you to go out there and have everything freaking work. So we go on next to have Klein, who is to talk to Captain Marco, and we have them draw conclusions of like, well, hey, it seems that Fran is going along with us, the CIA agent, because the CIA really wants answers, so she's coming along too. And we have Captain Marco that is asking Klein, it's like, well, what do you think it really is? And Klein's like, I don't really know. Like, I'm not going to go on and just give you an answer if I'm not really sure. So we have the briefing, and so Fran is going on and stating that these things are just camouflage armor entities. And Klein is like, well, we don't really know that for sure. And Fran is just like we just need something to call it. So they decide to go on to this mission, and so they end up getting transported out there and all that kind of jazz. So we have all these trucks that are going on this mission. So we have Klein who has this camera and he's kind of outside, just kind of watching on the military making their way into this place. So we have the military going in to find uh, Sergeant Comstock, and he is underneath this tub. So we have Comstock that obviously is to be fairly traumatized about the event of what had unfolded, and we have people starting to like ask him questions, and he's very frazzled. So we have Comstock that states that all of his men are dead, and so we have sessions like, well, where are they? And they're on the third floor. So some of the guys go on to the third floor to then realize that they end up getting hit by these ghosts also. So we start to have the military guys start to blast clips into them, try and go on and use everything that they can, and nothing works. When all of them are trying to rappel down, some of them start smacking into one another because they start to all get attacked by this ghost. So we have guys rushing out desperately trying to get back in the vehicle, and we have at one point that Klein is to use his camera to notice that there is one of these things right in front of the door, and so Captain Marco uses this kind of like bazooka like weapon and shoots this thing, and it does nothing. So, and it ends up just killing Captain Marco afterwards. So, we have the guys going back in the vehicle, driving like crazy, and they end up landing on this landmine, and the vehicles end up flipping over. So, we have Klein that is trying to pull off this camera from this truck and now take it with him. So all these people go in to this one kind of factory, and they're not really sure if they're going to go on and get attacked or not, but like they're just hoping for the best. So we come to find out that whoever was in this factory had been in there for a very long time, and so they start looking further into it to find that there seems to be two kids that have kind of been hiding out for a while there. So we have Fran who starts to talk to these kids, and they eventually go on to explain that these are some ghosts of war, or that they're lost souls. So we have Sari, who is to be like one of the two kids, and the other one is Bogdan. So come to find out, Sari's father was to have gone on to put this barrier all around this facility, but then had died while doing it. And it seems that this guy who had put this barrier down was, of course, this scientist who had worked via this power plant on this experiment. So it seems that he knew all about this. And so when Klein was to try and see if this guy was still alive, they found his dead body instead. It's like, oh, okay, all right. So, like, we just have Klein, of course, that starts to, like, pick through the guy's dead body to find any information or anything that this guy wrote down somewhere. So, so now we end up having this team that is to realize, as Klein is to set up this camera, that the the ghosts are to seem to have problems getting through this, like, kind of iron. And come to find out, they're like, okay, that must be its weakness is iron. So they realize that this facility is full of this stuff, so they decide they're going to make dirty bombs and try to figure out a way to make weapons out of this iron to try and slow these things down. Because, of course, they're going to go on to get an extraction, which basically means they're going to get helicoptered out of there. So we have Klein realizes that he can go on and make a adjustment to his camera to make it seem much more like a projector that can project where all of these ghost like things are. So we have Klein that adjusts this thing, but it seems like it's kind of running very low. So, because all of the helmet cams aren't really working for all these military guys. So we have the guys that are realizing that they might not be able to get to this extraction, but Klein is like, no, I can kind of makeshift all these weapons and we could probably get there. So they run along to this one place where they're supposed to, like, stick out and stay out for these supposed tanks to come in and help them out. Well, Klein is to call the military and tell them how they can adjust these tanks so that way they have these lights that they can kind of see, or these cameras that turn into these kind of projectors that can kind of see these ghosts. So we have these tanks that roll in just in time as Klein's camera or projector is to have died out. So we have the group go on to kind of be stuck kind of in this, like, sandbag and kind of like hole like area, and we start to see that these ghosts are just kind of tearing through these tanks, even trying to just take them down, but not completely. And so we have this projecting light that can still kind of show some of the ghosts. So we have at one point that the kid is ending up standing up because he doesn't know what's really going on, and he ends up getting attacked and he ends up getting killed. So all of our characters rush to this helicopter to get the heck out of there. So it seems like they've gone on to figure some things out. So now they have to figure out where they are now, and they are at some civilian refugee shelter. So this seems to be the place that ends up becoming like their last stand, because of course we have General Orland, who is to have given up his base because he had gotten overrun, and he had gone from like 200 some odd people to now 19. So we go on to have them try and come up with some kind of strategy, but they really still can't figure out, like, what's really going on. So Klein is to finally, after really seeing these things very up close, he starts to figure out what they are. So Klein is to mention that these things like have to have some like man-made quality to them, that it can't just be that it's a ghost and like nothing more than that. It has to be that someone had gone on and weaponized this. And so we also had uh Sari's explanation of what her father did was that he made the containers from where the ghosts came from. So, meaning at some point he had made containers for where the ghosts were being held, and so this guy knew a lot about this. So, like, Klein is like figuring out that there had to have been a place that could make these bio weapons, and so they have to go on to make a bio weapon to take these things out, uh, to have unnatural properties to figure out how to eliminate this threat. So we go on to have the military that is to bring this kind of robot in called the Lotus, and it of course is to have this big massive camera attached to it as a projecting thing, so these guys kind of easily not have to have all these cameras to kind of take down this threat. So they come to find out that the origin of where this had to have all gone on and been must have been this power plant, because that's the only uh, thing that could generate as much power to create these monstrous things. So they create these bio weapons, and so we have Klein who is putting all these weapons together, and so like really all these guys are realizing that they're going to go on and have to test that this thing could work, and if it doesn't work. And we also have Klein who's saying words like reversing polarity and stuff like that, which, if you've ever gone on and seen Ghostbusters, you would have Egon go on and state at certain episodes, which wouldn't take very long, um, that he would have to like reverse polarity for certain equipment to work. So I was like, man, they're kind of stealing from Ghostbusters a little bit. But so they realize that they have to go to this power plant, and so we first have Sessions that has to come out with his men to try to see if even these weapons are going to actually work. So Sessions goes on to fire this gun, and it seems to work. So now we have all of the guys scrambling and firing away at all these ghosts, pushing Klein and Fran and these two other military guys to kind of press on that these guys need to figure out where the origin of this is to possibly either shut it down or figure out some solution. So the further and further Klein and Fran go into this, the more they realize that uh, these spirits were somehow like a number of people were to have gotten x-rayed, and then their bodies were somehow 3D printed to become these ghosts. So they end up stating the words condensate a lot for these ghosts, but they're like condensated ghosts. So we also uh when they were to make that laser in the beginning of the movie, we had Klein had to get this rare item called the Tentricine, I guess, from certain printers, and so they had to get it from like a 20-year-old item. So yeah, hopefully they can go on and find these rare items. But that was one thing that Klein had to go on to make his way to find in the beginning of this. And he's like, "Aha, Eureka!" And I was like, "What? What does this mean?" So we have them go all the way down to find this certain computer, and we have Fran who can kind of barely understand half of what they're stating here, and so she starts to make it out, and she's stating that they have to kind of uncouple these certain uh, bits of things that are kind of connected and pull this one lever to shut this whole thing down. And while they're doing that, we start to have a number of cells that all these spirits are kind of in this room, and they're starting to slowly but surely break free. So Klein is as quickly as possible trying to like with this wrench try to pull these cords out, and he then realizes that he had pulled all the cords, and Fran is like, "Well, you still haven't pressed the lever." So at this time we have Captain Sessions. It's like, hey, like what are you guys doing? Like, have you figured anything out yet? Like, come on, like we all of a sudden have Captain Sessions, who some of these ghosts are all of a sudden, or all these condescended, uh, 3D printed ghosts are all starting to lump together into one big massive monster, and so they're trying to figure out a way to wipe that out, and Captain Sessions has to connect like a bunch of guns all together with all these like kind of batteries to it to give one huge big massive blast. And so when he shoots this, it ends up having this big massive blast going out of this gun to wipe out this bigger uh, ghost. Let's just say it. It's easier to just state that they're ghosts. So we have Klein that goes on and tugs on this lever and pulls it and then kind of falls backwards. And we all of a sudden have the ghosts that all perfectly just stop and seemingly start to all fade. And they then realize, like, oh my god, is this like all over now? Like, great. So we have Klein and we have Fran who start to realize that there are also these containers with these kind of half alive but half dead people in them. And so Klein wants to go on and wants to undo all these people and make them fully dead. And Fran's like, no, like, you have to think of the greater good, that maybe we can kind of use what they've learned here. And Klein is like, no, the greater good is to kill these things off. And so we have Fran that agrees. Klein pulls the trigger on or pulls the cord from these things, killing them off. And so that ends up all getting resolved. So so Klein, Fran, and the rest of the military who are left alive all come from out of uh, this helicopter, and they're going back onto the base. So now we, of course, have everything going on and being all wrapped up, and we have Fran that is telling Klein that they're, of course, going to go on and like really go through that whole power plant and see like what they can go on and find out and possibly try to salvage from all that. And Klein is like, well, yeah, I kind of figured that you guys were going to do that anyways. So, as both of them are talking, we start to realize that Captain Sessions, Alessio, Sergeant Toll are all kind of getting their equipment together because they need to go out again. And Klein turns to Fran. It's like, don't those guys ever stop? And Fran is like, no, I don't think they can. Like, I don't think they want to. So we have Sessions. It looks at Klein, and he's just like, meh, and then he just kind of walks away. So we have Klein, who is going back to Virginia because he's done with what he needs to do here, and so General Orland is to state, it's like, well, yeah, like I kind of told you that uh, like you weren't going to be here for very long, that you should pack but don't unpack. So Klein ends up going into this I think it's like a I think it's a plane, and he leaves, and that's how the movie just kind of wraps up. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I did forget about. I kind of really brushed through this one. I didn't go into much detail, but also, like with this movie, it is a lot of just action-packed sequences and a really interesting story. So kind of reminds me of like Coma a little bit when I was to review the movie Coma. Um, but man, there's always just a lot of interesting hidden gems uh, for this channel, but there's also some really weird stuff too. Because of course, at some point, I just go on and I'm like, well, I saw this movie and I guess I should review it because it's either that or I just kind of miss out on a chance to just kind of like, hey, I saw this. I wonder if you did too. So, with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.